So, it has its own government, military, currency, elections, and yet, the world says it doesn't exist. Welcome to Somaliland, the country that's not a country, but might just be Africa's best-kept secret. Tucked away in the Horn of Africa, just north of Somalia and facing the Gulf of Aden, lies a place few outsiders can find on a map: Somaliland. Officially, it doesn't exist. The world considers it part of war-torn Somalia. But on the ground, it's a completely different story. Somaliland declared independence in 1991 after the collapse of Somalia's central government. Since then, it's built its own institutions, elected presidents through democratic elections, and even created its own currency and passport. While Somalia has struggled with terrorism, piracy, and political chaos, Somaliland has remained remarkably stable and peaceful. But here's the mystery. Why has no country in the world officially recognized it? Somaliland has done almost everything a sovereign nation is supposed to do, except be accepted by the international community. It has no seat at the United Nations, no embassies from major powers, no access to international aid the way recognized countries do. Yet, it has survived, even thrived, in silence. How does a place that doesn't exist manage to outperform its recognized neighbor in safety, democracy, and order? Why do its people still fly a flag the world refuses to see? This is the enigma of Somaliland. Chapter 1: History and Struggle for Independence. To understand Somaliland's strange status today, you have to go back over a century. In the late 1800s, Britain carved out a coastal protectorate known as British Somaliland, while Italy controlled the south, Italian Somaliland. For decades, these two colonies developed separately, with different administrations, infrastructures, and even languages of government. But when the winds of independence swept across Africa in the 20th century, both Somalilands saw an opportunity. On June 26, 1960, British Somaliland gained its independence. Just 5 days later, it made a bold and hopeful move. It voluntarily united with Italian Somaliland to form the new Republic of Somalia. The dream was to build a strong, united Somali nation. But the dream didn't last. Power quickly became centralized in the south, and people in the north, the former British Somaliland, began to feel neglected, marginalized, and underrepresented. Tensions simmered for years. Then, in the 1980s, under the brutal regime of Siad Barre, things turned violent. Thousands of civilians in the north were killed by government forces. Entire cities, including Hargeisa, Somaliland's capital, were bombed by their own national army. When Somalia collapsed into civil war in 1991, Somaliland seized the moment. It unilaterally declared independence, vowing never to reunite with the South. Since then, Somaliland has charted its own course. No longer tied to Somalia's endless conflicts, it began rebuilding from scratch, forming its own parliament, holding regular elections, and creating a remarkably peaceful state in one of the world's most unstable regions. But the international community never accepted the breakaway. Why? Partly fear of encouraging secession elsewhere. Partly politics. African leaders didn't want borders to start unraveling. And partly loyalty to the idea of a unified Somalia, even if that unity only exists on paper. For Somalilanders, though, the past is too painful to forget. They see independence not as a choice, but as survival. Chapter 2: Life in Somaliland Today. Walk through the streets of Hargeisa, Somaliland's capital, and you'll notice something surprising. It doesn't feel like a failed state. You won't find the chaos that defines much of southern Somalia. No warlords roaming the streets, no Al-Shabaab checkpoints, and no collapsing institutions. Instead, you'll see schools full of children, functioning government buildings, and people going about their daily lives in peace. That's because Somaliland has built its own system from the ground up. Since 1991, it has held multiple peaceful, multi-party elections, something rare in the region. Power has even transferred from one president to another, democratically. Opposition parties campaign openly, and citizens line up to vote, often dipping their fingers in ink to prevent fraud. In a region where authoritarianism and instability are common, Somaliland stands out as a quiet, democratic success story. Its government institutions are remarkably functional. There's a bicameral parliament, ministries that oversee everything from education to health, and a judiciary that, while not perfect, operates without the kind of lawlessness seen elsewhere in Somalia. Somaliland even boasts a relatively free press. While there are restrictions, as in many young democracies, journalists are generally able to report on politics and corruption without fear of assassination. Compare that to Somalia, where journalists often risk their lives just for doing their jobs. But perhaps the most powerful force in Somaliland is something intangible: national pride. Walk into a shop or home, and you'll see the green, white, and red flag of Somaliland flying proudly. People speak passionately about their identity, separate from Somalia. In their minds, they are already a country, no matter what the world says. They use their own currency, the Somaliland shilling, which circulates alongside the US dollar. They have their own passport, which isn't widely accepted, but still represents their sense of sovereignty. They run their own schools, hospitals, police forces, and even foreign policy, often hosting delegations from countries that cannot officially recognize them. For over 3 decades, Somaliland has operated like an independent nation in everything but name. And for its people, recognition isn't just a political goal. It's about dignity, justice, and a future they believe they've already earned. Chapter 3: Challenges Without Recognition. Despite its remarkable stability and progress, Somaliland faces a harsh reality. Because it isn't officially recognized by any country, not even by the African Union, it exists in a kind of diplomatic limbo, and that comes with serious consequences. First and foremost, Somaliland has no access to international financial institutions like the IMF or the World Bank. That means no development loans, no emergency funding, and no large-scale infrastructure support from the organizations that help other countries build roads, hospitals, and schools. Instead, Somaliland must rely heavily on its own resources, its diaspora, and private donors, a massive challenge for a region still recovering from decades of conflict. It also has no embassies from recognized states. Countries may send quiet delegations or open liaison offices, but not formal embassies, because doing so would signal diplomatic recognition. In return, Somaliland can't send ambassadors abroad, and it has no voice at the United Nations. When global issues are debated, Somaliland isn't in the room. It has no vote, no seat at the table. This lack of recognition also scares off many investors. Multinational companies are often reluctant to put serious money into a place that doesn't legally exist. Deals are riskier, contracts harder to enforce, and insurance nearly impossible to secure. While some Gulf countries and Turkish firms have tiptoed into Somaliland, especially to invest in the strategic port of Berbera, the level of foreign investment remains far below its potential. Even aid agencies face barriers. Some international NGOs can't operate directly in Somaliland without going through Mogadishu. the very government Somaliland broke away from. This leads to bureaucratic confusion, misallocated funds, and lost opportunities for real development. So Somaliland is stuck. It functions like a country, it governs like a country, but it's treated like a province. It plays by the rules of the international system, yet the system won't even acknowledge it's playing. It's a nation caught between success and silence, doing everything it can to stand tall, while the world looks the other way. And for Somalilanders, this lack of recognition isn't just a diplomatic inconvenience. It's a daily reminder that their progress is invisible, their identity ignored, and their future unfairly constrained. Chapter 4. What the Future Holds. As Somaliland enters its fourth decade of self-declared independence, one question looms larger than ever. Will the world finally recognize it? The push for international recognition is gaining new momentum. Somaliland's leaders continue to lobby the African Union, the United Nations, and powerful Western nations, arguing that their peaceful, democratic track record should speak louder than outdated colonial borders. And increasingly, some countries are starting to listen, even if only in whispers. One of the most significant recent developments has come from Ethiopia. In early 2024, Ethiopia signed a controversial memorandum of understanding with Somaliland, potentially giving Ethiopia long-sought access to the sea through the port of Berbera. In return, there's speculation Ethiopia may recognize Somaliland, or at least deepen ties in ways that challenge the status quo. This bold move rattled Somalia and drew global attention. Meanwhile, the United Arab Emirates has also invested heavily in Somaliland, modernizing the Berbera port and building a military base nearby. The UAE sees Somaliland not as a failed state, but as a strategic ally in one of the world's most geopolitically sensitive zones, near the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aden, and key global shipping routes. With growing interest from regional powers and quiet partnerships from Western nations, some are asking, could Somaliland become Africa's Taiwan? A functional, self-governing democracy that operates independently, even if major powers tiptoe around formal recognition. The comparison isn't perfect, but the parallels are striking. Both are politically isolated, economically constrained, yet determined to shape their own destiny. Like Taiwan, Somaliland survives by being too competent to ignore. An island of stability in a sea of conflict. The road ahead won't be easy. Recognition may still be years away. But Somaliland isn't waiting for permission. It's continuing to build, govern, and reach out to the world. Determined to prove that statehood isn't just declared, it's earned. For the people of Somaliland, the future may still be uncertain, but it's a future they're building, brick by brick, with a quiet confidence the world can't overlook forever. So, should the world recognize Somaliland? For over 30 years, this unrecognized nation has been a quiet case study in resilience, self-governance, and national identity. While its neighbor Somalia has battled civil war, terrorism, and political collapse, Somaliland has chosen a different path. One paved with ballots instead of bullets. It doesn't fit neatly into global norms, yet it continues to defy expectations. Somaliland is proof that statehood is more than a signature on a UN document. It's the daily work of running a country, protecting a people, and nurturing a vision. And that raises the question, if a place walks like a country, talks like a country, and governs like a country, is it one? The world may be slow to answer. But what about you? Should Somaliland finally be recognized as an independent state? Or does that open a dangerous door to breakaway regions everywhere? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. This story is still unfolding, and your voice adds to the conversation. Because in the end, recognition isn't just political. It's personal.